Thank you, President Eisgruber, for your generous words and your warm welcome. I am so honored to be here with all of you on this very special day and in this very special place. Families, I know how proud you are of your graduates. Many of you have sacrificed for your students and loved ones to be here today. Faculty and staff, congratulations on shepherding another remarkable class through their Princeton journey. And to the class of 2024, you started college during a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic, and our world continues to bring you its utmost challenges. You have been through so much, you have met and endured, and you are on the verge of graduating with a deep and meaningful education from this great institution. You have worked so hard to reach this day. Please give yourselves a huge round of applause. This is a time of celebration, and I know a lot of you are celebrating, as you should. It's also a time of reflection, a time to think about what you will do with this great gift of the education that Princeton has given you, because that is what it is, a gift. I remember thinking deeply about this exact question, what I would do with the benefit of my Princeton education. When I was accepted to the Master's in Public Administration program at Princeton, I felt like I had won the lottery. And in some ways, I literally had. I got the chance to study on this beautiful campus on a full scholarship and with a living stipend. And before coming here, I had been living in New York, working with community-based organizations serving children and women in need, including Black and Latina mothers struggling to break cycles of poverty, addiction, and sexual abuse that had entangled them in the criminal system. I saw how those women met unequal justice in the legal system, and I wanted to pursue a joint degree in law and public policy to get the skills and training I needed to advance equal justice under the law. Princeton gave me the chance to complement my legal training by learning about multidisciplinary approaches to some of the most intractable public problems of our day, and to learn from Nobel laureates and leading practitioners alongside classmates who hailed from around the globe, people with life experiences very different from my own, but experiences from which I knew I could and should learn. It also meant moving up the hill that way to the graduate college, which some of you may have ignored during your 4 years here, and that's totally okay. Moving into a dorm room and eating most of my meals in a Gothic-style dining hall, straight out of Hogwarts, minus the robes and the owls. And even though I was in my mid-20s at that point, I loved every minute of it. I knew that Princeton was special. And that was because it was never foreordained that somebody like me would study here. And that was possible only because, decades before I was born, my father made a courageous choice, one that my mother reaffirmed after they were married. They both left everyone and everything they knew and loved in a country half a world away, now known as Bangladesh, leaving behind all of that familiarity to come here to the United States to forge a new life. Because of their courage and vision, I had the chance to live here in America, in a country where I had the opportunity to work as hard as I could to pursue my education and eventually a career that people in my family in Bangladesh could only dream of, including and especially many women and girls. My late father grew up at a time when Bangladesh was part of the British Empire. He was a colonial subject. And at the time, there were prevailing stereotypes about what he, as a Bengali and a Muslim growing up in a rural community, could accomplish. But he was driven, and he left home to go to school. He boarded with his teachers and eventually made it to medical school in the region's capital, Dhaka. He was so smart and so good in his quiet, humble way that he was the first person from the land that is now Bangladesh to win a Fulbright grant. He got the Fulbright, and he used it to travel to the United States in 1957, where he worked as a doctor in a hospital. And this was before smartphones and messaging apps. He missed his family deeply and painfully. Letters were few and infrequent. But he was good at his work. He loved his colleagues and his patients, and he loved the United States. He became a neurologist, a doctor of the brain, and was so good at what he did, he got the chance to study in London and in Glasgow. But even as he got those opportunities, he dreamed of America. When he got the chance to do his residency here in the United States, he jumped at it. He came back and eventually settled in Chicago, where he worked as a physician for more than 40 years. He served US veterans as a physician in the US Veterans Administration Hospital. There was a neurologist shortage in the city of Chicago, so he worked at multiple hospitals, serving Chicago's diverse communities. And he taught medicine at the University of Illinois in Chicago. And when my mother joined him here in the United States, together they founded the American Bangladeshi community in the city of Chicago. And they served as community leaders. They made our home a place where people came when they needed advice on how to navigate this country, when they needed encouragement, a warm meal, or a place to stay. And they helped so many people. So many people came in and out of our house that my older brother joked at one point that actually we might be living in an outpost of the Holiday Inn. And every few years, when we would take our summer vacations and travel to Bangladesh to see our family, many of whom still lived there, dozens of people would line up outside of my grandmother's home or my uncle's apartment because they knew that the doctor was there from America. They needed someone to help treat them. They didn't know what was wrong. And even though my father was on his vacation, long into the night, he would see and speak to and treat every single person. And often, he would purchase their medication himself because he knew they didn't have the means to pay for it. My mother was the CEO of our extended circle of family and friends, raising 3 children, sacrificing her own education to help 2 of her brothers, who were also physicians, to immigrate to the United States with their families. She worked 2 jobs, did countless hours of community work, and visited people in our community who were sick or needed help. She also was active in interfaith activities. My father modeled for me what it meant to be the first in a community to do something. And my parents together modeled for me that with great opportunities come even greater responsibilities. The responsibility to treat others with dignity and respect. The responsibility to share knowledge, and the responsibility to do what we can to make the path a little easier for those who follow those of us who are the first. With parents like these, it was no surprise that I was committed to using my education and training and skills to help make our world a better place. As a student, I immersed myself in studying the history of our country and our government, and I was inspired and became a little obsessed with our Constitution and its promise, most of all, for equal justice under the law, a promise that is not available in other countries of our world. And I just wanted to find the best way that I could help advance that enduring promise. So while pursuing my joint degree in law and public administration, I tried every kind of public interest work in the law that you could think of. That took me to working on peace and ethnic conflict resolution in Bosnia-Herzegovina, to doing human rights documentation in India, to working on the investigation of war crimes in Uganda, but from the International Criminal Court in The Hague. And it took me to an internship at the National American Civil Liberties Union in New York. And by taking those chances and doing lots of different kinds of jobs, I learned that there are so many ways to advance equal justice under the law and found my own path. For nearly 14 years, I worked as a litigator at the American Civil Liberties Union, bringing litigation to uphold the values of the U.S. Constitution and the rule of law on behalf of poor people, U.S. veterans, women, people of color, immigrants, and others facing violations of their constitutional rights. The people I represented couldn't afford a lawyer. None of them would have had a day in court had it not been for the work that I and my colleagues did on their behalf pro bono. Yet their cases were tremendously important, not just for themselves, but for our country. They sought to ensure that all people are treated fairly and equally by the legal system and law enforcement, regardless of wealth, race, ethnicity, religion, disability, or other characteristics. And through this work, I met Americans from all walks of life. I traveled across the country and spoke to people in community halls in Milwaukee and New York City, in homes and trailers in the Mississippi Delta and the South Carolina coast, and in prisons and jails in Illinois and Georgia. And I listened to their lived experiences. I learned how to advocate for their constitutional rights in the highest courts in our land. And on behalf of these people, I brought emergency lawsuits to protect immigrants from dangerous conditions in Illinois jails, class action lawsuits against the unlawful jailing of poor people, poor mothers, simply because they could not afford to pay fines and fees, even though they were never given a lawyer or a court hearing where they could explain to a judge that they simply couldn't afford to pay. And I worked with community members in Milwaukee and New York to help bring litigation to advance constitutional, safe, and effective policing, not policing based on race or religion. And almost every person I represented was not looking for financial compensation. They were looking to address violations of their rights and to help ensure that what happened to them wouldn't happen to others. And my job was to ensure that the legal representation they got was of the highest caliber. Representation that was every bit as meticulous and effective and thorough as that which Fortune 500 companies can pay for. And to my great surprise, in many of these cases, actually a majority of them, I was able to reach across and speak with people with very different viewpoints, representing defendants in these cases, and to talk to them about how to settle the cases for significant reforms to prevent constitutional violations from happening in the future. By doing this, we achieved so much more for our clients and to enforce equal justice under the law. And not only did these lawsuits, whether they resulted in settlements or court orders, change practices in specific places where we sued, they led to statewide changes that helped hundreds of thousands of people in Georgia, Mississippi, New York, South Carolina, Washington, Wisconsin, and other places. This is the work I was doing when the process opened up for a job application to serve as a U.S. district judge. And although I loved my work as an advocate, I thought it was important for someone who had represented people who could not afford a lawyer to apply. And last year, after being recommended by Senator Schumer, nominated by the President, and confirmed by the Senate, I became a U.S. district judge and the first Muslim woman and Bangladeshi American to be confirmed in this role since the Judiciary Act was passed in 1789, in about 235 years. And I believe that I have the best job in America. Every day, I go to work in a United States courthouse, and I work along public servants to help advance justice in cases small and large, brought by people and entities from all corners of our society. The issues we resolve range from the relatively straightforward to the extraordinarily complex and novel, and some of them involve even the most sensitive and challenging questions of our time. But in every single case, in every single court appearance, I have the chance to ensure that the people who come to a federal court, the entities that come as plaintiffs or defendants, or as the government, as the prosecution, or as a criminal defendant in the case before me, is treated with dignity and respect, and that they get a fair chance to be heard. Since my confirmation as a judge, I have heard from hundreds of people, young people, people working in public interest law, American Muslims, Bangladeshi Americans, frankly, Americans of all races, religions, and backgrounds, and from people across the world. They expressed to me pride in my confirmation to serve as a U.S. District Judge. They tell me that my confirmation shows them that they too can be seen for their own excellence and can get the chance to work at the highest levels of their chosen profession. They tell me that watching me be selected as a federal judge after a career dedicated entirely to representing people who couldn't afford attorneys shows them that pursuit of the work in public interest can lead people to cultivate the skills needed to serve our country and to serve in the important role of a federal judge. And I'm glad that each and every one of these people feel inspired because they should. Because our country is inspiring. And it's my hope that each and every one of the young people who have contacted me will work hard, will pursue their education, and will one day apply just as I did, because after all, it starts with a job application, to serve in the role of a U.S. District Judge. And I hope that they too will be able to take the oath that I took, the oath to defend and protect the United States Constitution, to provide equal treatment to rich and poor, and to ensure that each case that comes to our federal courts is decided fairly and impartially, and that by doing so, to ensure that the rule of law remains the backbone of our democracy, the necessary foundation of the life and the liberty that we all hold dear. This is the oath that will govern my work for the rest of my days on this earth. And fulfilling this oath every day with honor and with gratitude is my way of paying forward to my country and to other human beings all that I have given and received because of that courageous decision that my parents made so many decades ago. To the class of 2024, I wish you lives filled with meaningful and rewarding work that makes use of what are your great talents and pays those talents forward to those around you. I hope that as you move forward in your chosen professions, you approach different opinions and perspectives not as a threat, but as opportunities to learn. And I hope that you, like me, take advantage of the fact that you may achieve more than you ever dreamed possible by finding opportunities to work with those with whom you may actually disagree, even where those disagreements may be significant. Acknowledge those differences and disagreements, understand them, and then find the common ground. And I urge you to take chances, experiment, and understand that there is no single path forward in a meaningful life. There is just taking stock of where you are at each stage to make sure you are in a role, to allow you to be the change you want to see in the world, and to make sure that every day you are doing work that you actually love to do. I cannot wait to see all and to read about all that you will collectively accomplish. Class of 2024, you have already shown that you can achieve. Go out there and achieve some more. I wish you the best of luck and success.